Hi, thank you again for joining me to hear more of my woo-woo life story. I have been procrastinating on recording these for all obvious reasons and also some trigger warnings. But I feel like telling my story is releasing something and allowing me to move on from that whole chapter of my life up until now, the whole first third or first quarter of my life, right? And that's a big thing to let go of, to tell your story and then set it free into the world, set it free from myself. I think very much as a thing where, I don't know about you, but sometimes I have a really good memory, but then as soon as I tell someone what I needed to remember, I forget it. It's like I've set it free, I don't need to remember it anymore. And I feel like that's kind of happening telling my story. And so if you're feeling called to tell your story too, I think this is a big turning point at the moment where we're actually going to start rewriting our pasts as we timeline shift. But first we need to just tell it and get it out of our system and just put it to bed once and for all, or understand it from that 5D perspective, which is that, things have a purpose. And I know that saying everything happens for a reason might not resonate and it gets overused, but on some level everything happens for a reason. There is a higher pattern to our lives, and I trust that, I feel that, even though it sucks in the moment and it's not a nice thing to say to someone who's struggling. It's something where from an elevated perspective I can say, yeah, everything happened for a reason. And so here's part of that everything. Trigger warnings for this video. I probably should have done trigger warnings for the last one, but I'm going to be talking about pregnancy loss, a lot of different fears and anxieties and phobias around parenting and child mortality. And I think those are the main ones. I might talk a little bit about suicidal ideation or something too. So if you know that you're not feeling up to having those discussions today, that's okay. You can set this aside. You don't have to watch it. I think this is my assignment, although I was really surprised by how many people resonated with the first video and how many people kind of understood me better watching it. But yeah, here we go. And I'm opening my heart to everybody watching this. I love you. We're in this together. We rise together. Okay. So I was talking about in the last video, which I'll link in the comments in the description or whatever. I'll link somewhere. It'll be there. I was talking about having a super psychic, autistic, ADHD 3-year-old, and how that was really waking me up to his past life memories, and chats about, he'd say things like, I had a special watch when I was older, and he would talk about seeing passed over grandparents, and he would talk about flying down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon and asleep. And so just super tuned in. That absolutely started confirming what I was starting to suspect was the case. And for some reason I got really overwhelmingly fixated on this idea of having a tarot deck. Just really wanted a tarot deck. Ended up getting one, practicing with it. Anyone who reads tarot or has had a phase of their life where they did that, they can be super sassy, super brutal. All the cards for almost anybody who starts the healing journey, it's 8 of Swords, 9 of Swords, 4 of Cups. You're not being grateful, you're not being present, you're living in a victim mentality. And so that really kickstarted a lot of my shadow work on this really serious way. It was really empowering. And I also decided that I was ready to have another kid. And so I started using tarot to predict when I would conceive, how the pregnancy would go. And I was using tarot to predict time. And I was predicting when I would conceive, exactly. 3 months out, I pulled the 3 of Cups, which is 3 months. 2 months out, I pulled the 2 of Cups. 1 month out, I pulled the 1 of Cups. 2 weeks out, I pulled the 2 of Wands. And then the day before, I think it was the 2 of Swords or something. And then when I conceived, I pulled the 2 of Wands from a deck that was just 2 pink lines, which looked like the positive pregnancy test. And yeah, I knew I was pregnant straight away. I was reading this book, Spirit Babies by Walter Mackinson, which is amazing if you're interested in spirit babies and conception and communicating with children you've had or not had, or future babies or anything, really highly recommend that. Felt myself like conceive this child, was like super elated, just like bursting with love. And then I was doing this guided meditation by Sarah Hall on Insight Timer. So Sarah Hall, she's the lady who channels angels on YouTube. I didn't know anything about her. I just found this meditation on Insight Timer, and it was really, really beautiful and so visual and profound, the way that I experienced like talking to my unborn child. And I saw them really, really clearly as like a teenager, and they said to me, "I've died." And I was like, "Okay, what do you mean you've died? I don't understand that. Do you mean you died and you're reincarnating? Like, tell me more about it." And they're like, "No, I've died. And I just, didn't want to believe what that meant. Was drawing tarot cards, predicting the rest of the pregnancy, and I kept getting really bloody, gruesome, sad cards, and I was like, all right, guess I can't read tarot anymore. I'm not going to take that. Not going to pretend that I understand what that means. And then, of course, I started bleeding. Went eventually to the hospital for a scan because it was during COVID times. I was isolated in this little box of a waiting room with a door that suction closed behind you. It was like being on a spaceship or something, but fluorescent lights. There's this big TV blaring that I couldn't turn off. I was in this room by myself from 9 p.m. until 5 a.m. when I finally had the scan and went home. And all night I felt like I was crawling the walls, trying to turn the TV off, which was on so loud, and on commercial TV with the ads and reality TV. I was sitting there just doodling with a biro on the back of a piece of paper they'd given me. Realized I'd drawn the teenager I saw in my visualization. And I was using Lauren Aletta Lumina Tarot that she has actually on her Instagram. If you go back through her post, she's got a GIF of a tarot card flicking, and you can take a screenshot, and that was the same deck I'd been using at home. And I took a screenshot asking, where am I at in my pregnancy right now? What part of my journey or our journey am I on here? What's going on? And I pulled the Ten of Swords again. And so I just knew, and I stopped lying to myself, and I just burst into tears, and I was just so heartbroken. And in that same moment though, I felt it's so specific, but it's really what it felt like. It felt like 12 angels hugging me. And I didn't even believe in angels. I was getting into numerology, and whenever I heard the term angel numbers, I was like, I'm into numerology, but I don't think angels are real. But I felt angels around me, and I just felt like these beautiful, bright beings swaddling me, they were hugging me so hard, comforting me. I was just sobbing on the floor of this waiting room in the hospital, reckoning with the truth of what had happened. And that I'd lost, this kid. I thought I was 3 months pregnant, turned out to be a miscarriage, and I lost the pregnancy at 8 weeks. So I was walking around in denial for a month, and my body not even showing physical symptoms because I just didn't want to let go or accept what was happening. But just this profound love, this deep, profound love, nothing I'd ever experienced in my life, ensconcing me in one of the saddest moments of my life. It was nothing short of divine and supernatural. And this probably happened around the midnight, 1 a.m. mark. So I spent the rest of the night kind of meditating and saying everything I was grateful for and trying to talk to the spirit of that child. Of course, I did get the scan. It confirmed what I already knew. I went home, at sunrise in a taxi. My partner didn't want to talk about it. It was just kind of let's go to bed. And I was like, I don't want to talk about it. And I was all sad. And I was super depressed after that. I believe in eternal life, and I believe that nature takes its course, and things like miscarriages happen for a reason. I really believe that from a spiritual perspective and a biological perspective. I understand that they're super, super common. I understand that kids can come back or move on to some other purpose that they have, and sometimes just the pregnancy itself, rather than being born, is their purpose to experience that. And same for me, like it was a crazy awakening experience. But I was still so depressed, like grieving hardcore, and I didn't expect to be affected that badly, but I was so sad. And I was talking to the spirit baby, and I was saying, you're my child, you better come back, we're gonna try again. Wow, it was 1:14 when I looked at the clock then, who's like this kid I get to hang out with all the time now. That's really interesting. So yeah, I was super miserable, basically like emotionally blackmailing the spirit baby, being like, you're my child and don't you go anywhere and you're gonna come back. And then eventually I realized how messed up that was. And I kept channeling this image that I kept drawing again and again and again, 144, of this rainbow in concentric circles. So like a red line and then an orange circle and then a yellow circle inside that. And then it went black in the middle. And it was like this infinity rainbow. And it kept being shown like everything comes back. You know, the scale of our lives is bigger than this one lifetime. You know, everything exists in the now. And that really helped me understand that what I was expecting was unfair. And so I even felt from the spirit baby that they needed to be elsewhere. I felt this energy of like, okay, we'll try again. I'll stay if you want me to stay. But the sense of like obligation, that was really sad. And I just thought, oh, that's terrible. Like if I really love this spirit, then I have to set them free. And I said, okay, like, you're always welcome back. I'll always be here for you. I'll always be your mom, but I love you and I'm sending you love wherever you need to be in the universe. And I just felt like this elation for them, like they set sail. And that was really, really hard, and it still makes me sad. And like I buried their remains in the yard by myself. And yeah, I always get sad around like when their due date would be. I get sad around when I found out they would be born. I found out that I'd had a miscarriage the day before Father's Day. And then exactly 1 year later, the day before Father's Day, I gave birth to my youngest son, Luke, which means light bringer. And he's a life path 9, and life path 9s often come in after a miscarriage. They're often rainbow babies who come in to heal the family. And he came in and healed that day, because I thought Father's Day was going to be depressing for the rest of our lives. But then here he came, born on the same day I found out 1 year later that I'd had a miscarriage. So he was a Father's Day present to his dad and to me, and that was just so amazing. And even the way we named him was amazing, because like I can tell he's not the same spirit as that first child, but he's just such a beautiful, bright soul. And when he was born, we just couldn't kind of agree on a name. I had a name that I'd been carrying around for ages. Like my favorite name is David, and I always thought, you know, naming a kid David would be really cool. And it sort of suited him. Like I thought Davey would be cute, but yeah, my partner was on board with it, but we weren't quite sure. And we asked my son, Nicholas, my oldest, like, what do you think your brother should be called? And he said Luke. And I was like, almost angry about it, because I think I knew that was going to end up being his name, but it wasn't my favorite name that I had picked out. And so I was really annoyed, and I was like, where did you even hear that from? Why did you say Luke? And we asked him again, and he said chocolate cake. So we're like, did we hear wrong? And so eventually I asked my guides about it, and I said, like, what's his name? What does he want to be called? What should I call him? And my guide said, you can call him whatever you want, but his name is Luke. I went, what? And they're like, you can call him whatever you want. It's up to you. You're his mother. You get to choose his name. But his name is Luke. And I was like, all right then. And I was looking it up and, you know, seeing that it means light bringer. And I thought that was really, really beautiful. So I slept on it and we decided his name would be Luke. And after that, I still wasn't sure. And I said to my guides and angels, I said, can you please give me a sign that I made the right choice? And then immediately afterwards, I went back to reading the book that I hadn't touched since the night before I went into labor. It was, I think it was like Doreen Virtue's Ascended Masters and Angels, like one of her breakdowns of like, you know, channeling all these different beings. And the very last page I had been on was a prayer to the goddess Diana, whom I was communicating with before I conceived my first child. 1444. And it was a prayer to her, and the last line of that prayer was, "Let my life be full of light." And so I'm saying, I just named my kid Lightbringer. Can I please have a sign that I made the right choice? Open my book up. The first line I read is a prayer, "Let my life be full of light." I was like, well, I certainly did that. So that was again like, oh, I don't know if you can feel the love that I feel, but oh my God, there's like, to feel everything just like fit together like that, and to feel that love and joy, and that mother's love and joy too. Gosh, just like, you know, I know we all go through so much, but like to be a parent and to feel those levels of like grief and love, like gosh, parenthood rips you open. If you chose to be a parent in this lifetime, love to you. And if you didn't, that's cool. You've probably done it in past lives and future lives. It's crazy. Nothing rips you open like being a parent, or knocks you out of the center of the universe. So that is the beautiful story of how we named my second son. We named him Luke Jeffrey Charles, right? Remember that. This is important. This is another synchronicity coming. Luke Jeffrey Charles, right? Meanwhile, I had decided that I wanted to learn my ethnicity. So I took one of those spit in a tube DNA tests. What came out of that? I was deciding, okay, like I don't know much about my family. It was always just my mum, my brother and me. You know, I don't know my dad. I don't know my mum's family. Don't know anything. And I would really like to get some confirmation on that. All I knew about my dad, or thought I knew about him, is mum kept saying he's a quarter Chinese. Spat into this tube. Guess what? I'm not an eighth Chinese. I'm not anything Chinese. So I grew up thinking that the only thing I really knew about my dad is that he was like a bit Chinese. And so I walked around seeing all the Asian tourists on the Gold Coast as being like potentially my cousins, you know. So it made me not racist, at least. I even went to China on a school trip, which I felt like was some like pilgrimage to my fatherland or something. I'm not. I'm as white as they come. Turns out I'm like English, Scottish, Welsh, Irish, Norwegian, Swedish, and like my mum's family has been in New Zealand for a few generations, but like white New Zealanders. So yeah, lucky I wasn't, you know, wearing being ethnically diverse as like a badge of honor or anything. And thank God the man my mum thought was my dad didn't claim me, because turns out he's not my dad. So that was a bit of a revelation, which I was too awkward to talk to my mum about, because I told her I took a DNA test, and the first thing she said was, "And you're Chinese, right? Right?" And I was like, whoa, the fact that she asked me that straight off the bat tells me that she's not sure, and I didn't know that she wasn't sure. So I was just way too awkward to say anything. I went, you know, the science is still out. It's not super conclusive. You know, stay open-minded, because I was just like, I'm not ready to have this conversation yet. So that was like this big question mark. I was like, well, I guess I'll never find out about that. So I kind of put that question to rest for a little while. And then I started getting interested in this idea of like a spiritual lineage. So, you know, are there like witches in your family? You know, something like that. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I can go through my ancestry results and find like interesting women in history or something. Turns out I found like a lot of thieves and murderers. 2 different ancestors murdered this one particular earl. So like one great-great-great-great-grandfather murdered this earl, and then their like grandchild murdered the grandchild of the earl who was murdered. I'm a descendant of like George Rutherford, who like betrayed Scotland for Queen Elizabeth and became like a treasurer. There's like a statue of him in Edinburgh. Like clans people who betrayed their brethren. Yeah, a lot of weird, not so happy karma. I used to joke when I was a kid, and people would say like, oh, who are you descended from? Like, I know someone who was on the First Fleet, and I'm descended from this person and this person. I would just kind of joke and say, oh, thieves and whores. I'm descended from thieves and whores. It turns out I was completely right. And that's just one family line. But I was thinking, okay, I really want to know my spiritual lineage. And I was being a little bit sexist about it. I was looking for women on the family line. But then you know what happened? See, this is communion with the universe. Here's a lesson for you all. you ask the universe for something and then you need to take action to prove you're right. But the action is symbolic. The action could be like lighting a candle. The action could be buying a lotto ticket. The action could be setting up a website. The universe isn't necessarily going to work through that action. It's just demonstration, right? It's ritual, communion. So I said to the universe, I want to know my ancestry. Spat in a tube. That was symbolic. Because what else happened is I was chatting to my friend Emma Makepeace, who's got her own coaching business now. She's like super amazing and cool and beautiful. So Emma Makepeace called me just out of the blue one day and said, Kelly, you should start your own editing website. You should be a freelance editor. You'd be really good at that. I can see your website. Go do it. And you know how sometimes there are people in your life you just believe immediately. Like they tell you something and there's no reservation. And I'm a very skeptical person. I'm very headstrong. Before I got more enlightened and whatever, I'd be like, I'm always right and I will argue with everybody and I don't do what anybody tells me to do. But she was like, start a website. And I was like, sweet, okay, did it. Started my own editing website, put aside some money for like marketing and advertising and whatever. Turns out I didn't need it. Through word of mouth, I got like so busy. It was one of those things that was just meant to be. And then through that, my mum's dad found me, got in touch with me, because my mum and I were fighting at the time. We weren't talking. That was her decision. I would have talked to her, but because she wasn't talking to me, I was like, well, I'm going to talk to this person she wouldn't want me to talk to because she's not here to tell me not to and have her feelings hurt. So, you know, again, divine timing. If she hadn't been leaving me and making space in my life, I wouldn't have gone down this path of discovering and asking these questions that would have hurt her feelings and made her feel like less. I even talked to her soul. See, another tip, you can talk to people's souls and channel them even when they're not dead. You can talk to people who are alive. So I talked to my mum's soul and I said, Mum, why did you leave me? Why do you keep abandoning me? And she said, because I needed to get out of your way so that you could find out who you are and what you need to be doing and work this all out for yourself. And that's absolutely what happened. So I talked to my grandfather. Turns out he's a medium in the spiritual church, has these amazing stories about like clearing houses of spirits and chatting to them and helping them move into the light. And he's like, you might think I'm crazy, but that's just telling my truth. And I'm like, I am also on this path. So there, found out my spiritual lineage. Turns out he's a massive genealogy buff, has done all his ancestry work and research through like going to libraries and ordering birth and death certificates and ship records and whatever. Helped me separate my mum's side of the family from my dad's side of the family in like maternal paternity DNA matches. From there, worked out that if I had two cousins, a second cousin and a fourth cousin, or a third cousin or something with the same last name, then I and they have a great grandfather with that same last name in common. So I like contacted this family, went like, hey, I'm trying to find my real dad. Any chance you could tell me anything about your grandfather or great grandfather? Gave me access to the family tree, worked backwards, and then basically found who my great grandfather was. Speaking of spiritual lineage, turns out I'm descended from many Wesleyan Methodist reverends, which I mentioned in the last video, from Cambridge and who came to Australia, and they've got a descendant who was a Christian preacher and I think now is like Zen Buddhist or something really cool. Not that Christianity isn't cool, but I don't know their brand of Christianity. I'm not super familiar with Wesleyan Methodists, but yeah, so more like funny karma stuff. And interestingly, the two family friends in my life who were the closest thing to father figures I ever had, one was named Jeffrey, one was named John. These great grandfathers who were all Wesleyan Methodist preachers were all named John Jeffreys. So isn't that another interesting sync? So I was looking at all of these grandchildren, and you know, they had a lot of kids back then. So it's like, which of these many great grandchildren or whatever, where do I fit in this? Like, and I was going through them all and trying to find anybody who could be connected to me. I'm like, how am I going to find out if somebody was on the Gold Coast in 1992 to impregnate my mother so that I could be born in May 1993, right? I'm like, how am I going to figure this out? Was getting overwhelmed. You know, there were a few births in like Victoria and Perth, but nothing placing anybody in my part of the country or my part of the world. So I got really overwhelmed and I was like, okay, you know what? Oh yeah, So I went to a spiritual church because my grandfather is involved in the spiritual church. So out of curiosity, because I've been to lots of temples and churches, I was like, I'm going to go. Spoke to a medium there. I did not know that mediums did demonstrations every spiritual church meeting. I thought it was going to be like a sermon and a song and then you leave. Medium stands up, looks at me, he says, your dad's standing behind you. I'm like, as far as I know, my dad isn't dead. And he goes, no, you're wrong, he's dead and he's behind you. He's been with you for a long time, as in he died a long time ago. I'm like, no. Do you mean father figure? Because I've got father figures on the other side. He's like, no, it's your dad. So this was not a cold reading. This was not, oh, I'm getting a J name. Oh yeah, like this guy was legit saying, your dad is dead. If you think he's not, you're wrong. He's with you right now and standing behind you. And I was like, all right. So that was another weird thing. So again, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go out on a limb here. Let's say channeling is real. Let's say I'm talking to my guides and it's not made up. I've predicted enough and understood enough up until now. Enough miracles have happened in my life that I'm just going to try it and see if I can channel a name. And it's funny too, because when I was trying to name my son Lukey, one of the reasons why I kept getting so confused is every time I closed my eyes and thought, give me a name, spirit, I kept hearing Alan. I was like, Alan is not a name that you give to a baby born in 2021. Like it's a bit old school. It hasn't quite come back into fashion yet, you know, like maybe Alana for a girl, but Alan for a boy, I'm not sure about that. Just kept hearing Alan. And I see names as colors, so I thought, oh, maybe they're showing me like an A name or a yellow name or an orange name, because Alan is like yellow and orange in my head. It's like a kind of synesthesia. So I went, okay, give me a name, spirit. Give me a name on this family tree. What's my dad's name? Help me find him. I heard Alan again, really strongly, like so clearly, like as if someone was speaking in my head. And if you're learning channeling, it's mostly not that clear. This was so clear. It was the name Alan. So I went clicking, found an Alan Jeffries, and guess what? Died 1996 on the Gold Coast. So died the year I was turning 3 in the place where I was born. So I was like, I think I found my dad. Reached out, found his sister and his niece and nephew, and they're the most amazing people ever. Like up there in the top like 5 humans on the planet. Just these amazing, beautiful people. Totally accepted me and loved me. Like my cousin and I are so similar, like both have like a writing background, both like environmentalist activists, both woo-woo and into past lives. We have a similar vocal quality, like I'm a bit deeper and more nasal than her, but when I play back her voice messages, sometimes I think it's me. And we're just like instantly best friends, and just, you know, like when she first hugged me, she said, this is better than winning the lottery. And it was just, you know, and she said she was praying for more family members. And then I showed up like, hey, I think I'm your uncle's daughter. So that's been another miracle that's just happened to me in my life. And again, like validated all the channeling stuff. And again, what's my dad's name? Alan Charles Jeffries. And what's my son's name? Luke Jeffrey Charles. And he wanted to be called Alan as well. Luke is his name. And that's another awesome sync that I'm going to get to. But like I named my son after my dad I didn't know I had. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that amazing? And by the way, my cousin says that my dad comes, she always thinks of my dad, or she senses him when she sees kookaburras. And if you've seen my kookaburra video, you'll understand now why I'm super sentimental and emotional about that kookaburra. All right, I better stop now because I have to pick up my baby Lukey from school. Next video, I'm going to talk about everything that's happened since then, which involves twin flames and channeling and aliens and all that stuff. And I'm not sure how long it's going to take me to do that because I don't know how much I'm allowed to say because it's all super fresh and weird and new, and I don't want to give people bad advice or seem like a guru on any of this because I'm not. It's all super new to me as well. I have been wondering if I'm losing my mind the last year. But yeah, so that's the next, that's part 3, I guess. Okay, thank you for listening. Love to you all. Bye.